Poems from Exile, I think. Was it Poems from Exile?
I read from Exiled from My Mouth, but the title was, this is Exiled from My Mouth, my latest collection. It has a translation into German, which is Im Mund Exil. The translation was done by Matthias Goeritz. But yes, I was reading that for the poems of exile, about exile.
Yeah, so I watched you read this day for the very first time. And before that, all I knew about you is this always fighting tone when I read your writing. The tone is always a butter tone. And I was so moved at how sweet you sounded and how so relaxed. And I captured some of my emotions in this poem. And it's called Poetry We Can Be Everything.
Okay.
And it goes, she fights, she celebrates, she curses, but will bless too. She is a mother, a fighter, a leader, a friend. With poetry she can be anything, oh, she can be everything. Most times so misunderstood. A disgrace to women and motherhood, they have whispered so very often. A mad woman they have called her. But listen, listen to her voice crying out in the wilderness. A lioness crying out for her calves. A mother crying out for a generation. Poetry, we can be everything. Poetry, let's build missiles. Poetry, let's go to war. Poetry, carry our voice. Poetry, sound the war drums. Let's dance the war song. Poetry, we can be everything. Oh, we can be anything. Poetry, we can dream. Poetry, let's write our future together.
Beautiful poem.
Yeah.
Beautiful poem.
Thank you.
It reminds me of another poem I wrote that's called Teach the Nation Poetry.
Yeah, that's actually one of my very favorites.
Shall I read a verse from
please.
Teach the Nation Poetry, or shall I read all of it?
Read all of it.
All of it. So, Teach the Nation Poetry is taken from No Roses from My Mouth. Thank you for buying me roses as we get into Mother's Day. But when I was writing these poems, I wrote them in prison. I had been imprisoned, arrested and detained because I wrote one poem against dictator Yoweri Museveni. When I was in prison, I came out with 174 poems, and my friends had published them in this book. And page 12 says, Teach the nation poetry. Teach the nation poetry. Deployments of anti-riot police cannot shoot tear gas at rhymes, nor disperse the rhythm of our poems. Teach the nation poetry. Forgotten masses will pack our pain in stanzas that will pierce the core of the tyranny. Raw poems hit harder than your platitudes. Teach the nation poetry. Handcuffs cannot contain the potency of poems. Arrest warrants cannot disappear memorized verse. Poetry can never be detained in jail. Teach the nation poetry. Investigating detectives and crime solvers cannot decipher metaphors, similes, or symbols. Their charge sheets will never make sense. Teach the nation poetry. To recite it, to write it, and to interpret it. Poems of the oppressed will oppress the oppressor. Poems will transport us to freedom. So it sounds like both of us relate to poetry and poems as weapons of fighting, but also weapons of communicating.
Yeah, that's a really amazing way to look at it. And I've always wanted to ask, why poetry?
Why not?
And no, I think I would like to understand, and maybe someone listening is also wondering, at what point in your life do you start writing poetry?
Right, so I think for me that I'm multi-genre. Some poets are only poets. I write poetry, I write prose, I write short stories, I write the academic essay, and I think I'm mainly known for the academic essay. But in terms of writing my emotions, almost on a daily, I write a poem to express what I'm feeling. A lot of the poetry that I write is never seen by the world. It ends up in my diary, it ends up on a piece of paper, but some of it gets published. And I publish quite a lot on Facebook, my main platform, but also On Instagram, my daughter loves Instagram and she runs my Instagram account. On Twitter, when I'm really, really fighting and it's political poetry, I do that. And I think poetry for me has been a vehicle to expressing my pain, my joy, my frustration, my victory, my hopes, my illusions, my sadness. Different people do different things, but for me as a writer, poetry is important.
Yeah.
If I had that dog going to, it may be reflected in my poem. What does it mean to be interrupted by the sound of a door, right? And I think for me that while other genres like the article or the short story need a lot of space for expression, a poem can be 2 lines. A poem can also be a whole book. Okot Pabitek, Uganda's renowned poet, had a whole volume dedicated to just one poem, Song of Lawino, Song of Achol, Song of Malaya, Song of Kampala. And I think that there are different sorts of poetry, but for me, poetry has been very poignant, meaning it's able to carry messages directly, but also very indirectly. The symbolic language begs that we interpret. It also allows us to hide. And so as a mother, sometimes I want to communicate to my children, and what I do is to pack my messages in poems, which sometimes they read today, but sometimes I was writing for Baraka when she was 4 years old. I was writing for her when she turned 18.
Are your children writing poetry as well?
All my children write. They've written poetry at different times. Why do I think my Twitter live is not working? My children write different... Well, it's going. Hi guys on Twitter. I see you. Hi Justice, Hunter. Hi Sekalanda. Hi Luke. My children are writers of poems. And Waswa writes poetry in relation to his emotions. Kato writes rap music. But to write his lyrics or lyrics for his rap music, he's writing poetry. Baraka, I think, among the 3 children, is the one who studied literature because she wanted to study law, although she's now changed and she's studying medicine. But she wanted to study law, and so she did a lot of poetry study and writing. Many times when I'm struggling with rhyme, I say to her, Baraka, what rhymes with jurisprudence? And she'll give me a word. What rhymes with delusion? I was writing a poem yesterday, and I was looking for what rhymes with delusion. I was writing about peace being a delusion. And Baraka gave me confusion, obtrusion, like all these words.
You're
and
all
so
rhyming together.
all my children are writers. I think part of what we have as Ugandans is the beauty of our education system, that even in primary school, children are taught poetry, we are taught okuton, toma.
So Stella, we have seen you use your poetry in so many different aspects, and I think the most notable aspect was when you got arrested and sentenced to 18 months in prison for a poem that you wrote. When you wrote this poem at this point, did you ever expect that the poem would carry you that far, that your message would actually get to the recipients and the people who needed to hear this message?
Well, yes and no. So, I mean, hi Isaac Semakade. Isaac Semakade is on the Twitter space. Hi, my lawyer. And he defended me a lot. And I think we've had this conversation many times. Hi, Alicia Kienji. I see you. You're in Bavaria with us. In terms of the poem that I wrote that took me to prison, remember before that poem, I had been arrested for writing a Facebook post in where I say, Museveni matako mutako. And that is poetry because it's rhyming. Museveni tako. Museveni matako mutako. Olulimi lweyayogedde lwabadde lutako. Okay? And that's figurative language. To mean there is this president who is poo-pooing or shitting in our country.
And I like the very fact that you actually speak about the weight of the language that you use in your poetry. And I think that so many Ugandans have had a really hard time digesting this vulgarity in your poetry.
I think that is very pretentious.
Yeah, but I mean, the question is, when you mention Stella Nyanzi, the first thing anyone would say is, oh, she's so vulgar.
Not everybody will say that. Some people say, oh, she's so gentle, she's so mild, she should be much more aggressive. The sort of poets, the feminist poets I write with, say to me, that time you used matako butako. Maybe, instead of using a pair of buttocks, you should use our body as women. So women were calling me to use our body parts. And the poem that takes me to prison, because this one took me to court.
Yeah.
Isaac Semakade, who is on the space, ably put up a legal team and they fought. They fought against madness because the state said that woman is mentally sick, we must examine her. Okay? But Isaac fought that case and then women said, they were saying she's vulgar. This woman said, no, she could have said much worse. And I want to say that the poem that took me to prison, I use the most sacred part of womanhood.
Yes, Stella, but
the vagina.
You don't answer my question.
The
So
vagina.
for most people, and this is one of the questions that actually popped up, why the vulgarity?
The vagina is not vulgar. All of us we're going to Mother's Day. The vagina is not vulgar. I say you're shocked, my dear. You have it, she has it, she has it, I have it. These men, if they love women, they are in it and they came from it. Okay. As a feminist person, I want to teach women that our body parts were created by God, and when He created us, He said, you are fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yes, but what image does this set as a
that
mother?
We are women. I have told my daughter that if the worst comes to the worst, use what tools you have. And the vagina is very clean. It's beautiful. Humanity came from the vagina. We're celebrating Mother's Day.
Yeah.
Would there be any mother if we didn't have that body part? What makes it vulgar? Stop allowing the patriarchy to determine our body parts as dirty. We came from there. We wash those body parts daily. Omuntu atatawaza yekka yekka yasobola okugamba nti emmana ewunya emmana nkyafu omuntu oyo muwemu. In Buganda, before we leave this point of vulgarity, in Buganda, as a Nalongo, I have license to use this language. Now, in terms of fighting against a dictatorship, where we don't have guns, we don't have money to go to sue the president, sue Muhozi. As mothers, what do? I was a mother who went to Makerere University, studied literature, studied how to write poetry. I specialized in poetry. I studied mass communication. The day that I wrote about Museveni's mother's vagina, I wanted to make a point that there were so many members of parliament, women members of parliament. Our first lady is the Minister of Education. There were so many, at that time Rebecca Kadaga was the Speaker of Parliament. Those women were not challenging Museveni when he said, I am not your servant.
Yeah, and I think that you really captured the attention of the world when
had I used a different body part,
no,
if I had used the nose, or I had used Dora's shoulder, or I had used the breast, no one would pay attention. But the vagina is powerful. Do not allow the patriarchy to take that language away from us. That is why one word I don't allow my children to say, mother, that word, motherfucker. I don't allow my children to say that word. But I have said to them, if you need to insult a dictator or an oppressor, use my body parts.
Stella, I actually read, when you read about African activism, especially from women like Wangari Maathai, you realize that they've also used a lot of interesting methods of activism. I would like to know, do you think that Ugandans have been able to understand your activism, aside from the noise and the vulgarity, and how has it influenced a new breed of activists?
I think if you go to Wangari Maathai, you're forgetting our grandmothers. Grandmothers in Uganda, where I come from, when they were angry with you, the first thing they said was nyoko. If they were Christian, they would say something else. But women have used this language for a long time. The drunkard woman or the drunkard man who has to say something at the funeral of somebody. When everybody is keeping quiet, that drunkard will come and use that language. So before we go to activists who are trained in activism, think about where we come from. Think about the person who curses, what language do they use? Think about Wangari Maathai, but think about Sylvia Tamale, think about Solomon Nakawesi. The women's movement in Uganda had the vagina monologues for a long time. Yes. And I'm saying monologues, not monologues. I'm saying vagina monologues because the word for vagina in Uganda is mana.
Yeah.
Okay? And I think as women, we should take back the sacredness of our womanhood, especially in contexts like Uganda where we can do nothing. We have nothing to fight with. I think of Eddie Mutwe's mom right now, today, right now. How else can she fight when she has done everything? She has begged, she has pleaded. Tomorrow is Mother's Day. How else can Eddie Mutwe's mom mobilize power?
So
in terms of the vulgarity question, I refuse the idea that our most sacred, our most powerful tool of war as women, we don't have to fight for it. We just use words. But we can also undress and show them our body parts. And it's effective. So maybe people who are moral see the devil in our body parts. I refuse that. I have taught my daughters and my sons that this is a weapon we can use. And in Uganda it was effective.
Yes, it was. Not just in Uganda, in Africa. I think that you broke such a big record that everyone was talking about it everywhere. They were talking about it in West Africa, in South Africa.
So do not allow people to say the most effective tool. I paid nothing. I went to my timeline, I got my phone and I typed. Museveni, happy birthday Museveni. They say it was. It's point number 17 in my book.
I like that you talk about being a mother and how people like Eddie Mutwe's mother feel. And I think that at this point I would like to read you one of my very favorite poems from a German theologian who was opposed to the Nazi regime during the late 30s, and it reads, but I made a Ugandan adaptation of it. Okay. It says, First they came for the opposition leaders, and I did not speak out because, well, I was not a member of the National Unity Party platform. Then they came for the activists, and I did not speak out because I was not a human rights defender. Then they came for the journalists, and I did not speak out because, well, I am a journalist, but not a frontline journalist, tear-gassed, beaten-up journalist. Then they came for Eddie Mutwe, and I did not speak out because I was not part of that community. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out.
How appropriate.
Stella, just this past week, the media has been awash with stories of abduction, Eddie Mutwe being abducted. I mean, we've been hearing this for the past 4 years. But
40 years.
Yeah, 40 years. Yeah.
But you're saying 4. Why are you saying 4 years?
No, because this is when the People Power movement came into power, and
People Power said in 2017.
Yes, then they were talking about people disappearing, and some people thought, oh, they are crying wolf.
Yeah, but people have been disappearing in Uganda. Please don't allow people to shorten the history of our suffering as Ugandans.
Yes, so people have been disappearing
for a long time. Yes. Don't start, our history doesn't start with the arrest of the people who were arrested because of People Power.
Yes, what I'm trying to say is that...
No, you correct what you're saying.
Yes.
Ugandans have a long history of abductions and disappearances. Do not start blindly with the arrests that happened when People Power came.
I agree, Stella. But I think that what was very clear this time is that the chief bodyguard of Bobi Wine, Eddie Mutwe, he disappeared.
That was yesterday. It was last week.
Yes, just this past week. So when he disappears, the first son comes up on Twitter and he says, oh, I am holding him in his basement and teaching him Runyankore. Now, Stella, you live in Germany now, and you are very familiar with the turbulent German history of the genocide, and just in neighboring Rwanda. And of course, as a mother, I think I would like to ask if, because Uganda is the second youngest population in the world, when we think about the future of our young generation and in the direction that the sectarianism and the tribalism is going, Are we worried that this is something that could have long-term effects? And I would like to read you something from someone I follow on social media, and this is Andrew Chamagero, and he writes, when a soldier replaces his oath with a tribal drum, the republic is already bleeding. In any constitutional democracy, the military is not a tribe. It is a national institution. But what we are witnessing today in Uganda is the alarming erosion of that principle through the reckless utterances and tribal posturing of General Muhoozi Kainerugaba. To abduct a citizen, subject him to dehumanization, and boast that he is being taught Runyankore, as if national unity will be achieved by linguistic coercion and ethnic arrogance, is not only irresponsible, it is criminally reckless. This is not an isolated incident, it is a pattern of weaponizing tribe, dropping it in uniform, and unleashing it as both a sword and shield. And we must ask, what legacy are we normalizing when impunity speaks louder than the Constitution? That is not patriotism. That is state-sponsored tribal humiliation. That is fatism and fatigues. This man is not just inciting tensions, he's normalizing ethnic superiority. And when he parades himself on social media, flexing military privilege like a TikTok trend, the poor Banyankole in the villages will pay the price. Because when the backlash comes, it won't touch him. It will touch the mother in Bara, the youth in Bushenyi, the border rider in Intungamo. They will bear the cross of his reckless tongue. And where are the so-called elders? Where are the moral voices from all faiths and political spaces? Why are they quiet? You shout amen on Sundays, but you go mute when a general terrorizes the public. You are not men of God. You are men of convenience. Let's be clear. Criticizing tribalism is not tribalism. Speaking the truth is not hate speech. Naming injustice is not incitement. To the elite, your silence is not wisdom. It is cowardice. Your children may be studying abroad, but one day, the system you refuse to confront will find its way to your doorstep. You will not hide forever. Uganda must stop guilt-tripping the oppressed for speaking up. This is not politics. It is a fight for dignity. We will not be ruled by fear. We will not kneel to uniform tribalism. We demand justice, we demand accountability, we demand leadership, not inherited impunity. Now, the question is, Dr. Stella.
I hope you have permission from Andrew Chamagero to read the entirety of his
piece. Yes, he shared it publicly. So, addressing the human rights situation in Uganda requires a multifaceted approach that would include making sure that the judicial arm works and that minority groups are protected. As a mother, what do you believe is the solution of the human rights situation in Uganda and protection of vulnerable groups like women and children?
I mean, look, human rights in Uganda are constitutional. It doesn't matter what has happened to our constitution. Ugandans must never forget that our constitution has a Bill of Rights, right? And these are international human rights standards. Okay? It's very, very easy for Ugandans to swallow and normalize the abuse of human rights. But these are inherent. They are God-given. Mm-hmm. The government in power does not give us human rights. Okay? We are born with these rights. That's the first thing that I want to say. Even in repressive systems such as which we have, where the military under Muhoozi now, but the government under dictator Yoweri Museveni, the masses without particular leadership, who is leading the farmers, who is leading the students, who is leading women, who is leading, that we're so fragmented as people, our cultural leaders, our religious leaders are very fragmented. In the absence of leadership, I think it is important, therefore, that then mothers and women come to the fore. Tomorrow is Mother's Day. Mm-hmm. And I think for me that one of the things I would want to see, one of the things I really believe in is the power of the family unit. It doesn't matter if one is a single mother such as myself. In my home, it's female-headed. I'm the man and I'm the woman because the father of my children is at large. It doesn't matter if there's a spouse, daddy and mommy and the children. It doesn't matter if there's daddy and 4 mummies because we have polygamous homes. It doesn't matter if it's daddy alone. I want to say for me that the role of women as mothers has been subdued just as our body has been made vulgar. The role of women as mothers in Uganda has been subdued. But you're cutting me short before I give you my response. Don't cut me short.
Okay.
Don't cut me short. Because this is important. Mother's Day has been reduced to a ceremony. The importance of mothers has been reduced to just calling us mama when they want us to raise particular patriotic children. But when we are raising people who are resisting our oppression, resisting dictatorship, the people who will speak when nobody else will speak, then mothers are told to shut up. And they tell us to be subdued and submissive. I want to call mothers out before you go on to your next point. This is important. Can Mother's Day 2025 become a time when motherhood comes to the front line as well? Where mothers go back to telling their children, nti Drake gwe gatonaba kufuluma, Uganda ojibulira otya. Nti Derek gwe gatonaba genda kuchakala mu ndongo. Ebya Uganda tukoze tutya. Because mothers, we have a particular authority which we must call to the fore in Uganda today. Tomorrow is Mother's Day. Before they give you flowers and chocolate, and they sing, can we give mothers the centrality of position to effect change and train change leaders?
Which brings me to my next question. Do you think that there has been a leadership gap
of course
on the side of the motherhood? Because we actually have women in politics and...
No, but who is the mother of the nation? Who is the mother of Uganda today? Mama Janet. Mama Janet.
Okay.
Mama Janet mutabani we muhozi. Atugumbula abantu yetanise ne eti mutugwe gongambi. The mother of the nation has a son called Muhozi, who put a young man in a basement, a young man who is a father, to at least children that we know about. What is Mama Janet doing for the nation? I sang her a song. I you and my mama. You know Rihanna has a song. I can't reproduce the songs because I don't. I listen. I love music. I studied music in Gayaza. Nice. I play piano and guitar and drums. So Baba Kisimba. Okay. But what I'm saying is, what is Mama Janet doing for Uganda? When her son is torturing Ugandans, when Muhozi is torturing Ugandans, they heard that Muhozi's actual mother died. But what we know is Mama Janet is the mother of the nation. How has she served Ugandans through motherhood when young girls today who attend schools that are governed by her Ministry of Education still miss school on days when they menstruate simply because they cannot afford it, their parents are too poor? The president of Uganda, Dictator Yoweri Museveni, in 2016 promised during his campaign that he would provide sanitary pads to poor schoolgirls so they wouldn't miss school. Up to today, Mama Janet has never pushed her husband to fulfill that promise. The first daughter, and the second daughter, and the third daughter of the first family. How are they serving us through their mother? So I think for me that the role of motherhood in Uganda can play important roles. These women you're talking about, whether it's the fishermen who are led by Robin and Abanja, the Prime Minister, or it's those foolish clowns, as Muhozi called them, who sit in Parliament, led by the brown bleached Anita Among or whoever it is. Those women are not serving us. All the districts of Uganda have got a woman member of parliament. What are they doing for the nation? How? How many of those mothers said no to the 100 million that was given last month? So what is motherhood doing? It's Mother's Day, but what are those mothers in power doing? The women who are in journalism. How do they serve the cause of poor women? The women who are in civil society organizations, apart from knocking their high heels, I call them feminists in high heels. How are they serving the masses in Uganda? The women who are in foreign embassies, all those ambassadors ambassadors that we have, those foreign envoys in our country, what are they doing? The women who have remained true to the cause are women who are fighting for the liberation of Uganda to free our country from dictatorial Museveni.
Stella, why do you think some women have been very scared of coming to the front line and taking up their roles and actually speaking their mind?
I want to underline some, because not all of us are scared. While I'm very critical of very many Ugandan women, not all of us are scared. And me, I want to first celebrate and acknowledge the women like myself, yourself, Dora, Baraka, who are at the front line every day. So I want to talk about those who are scared. It's very costly to be a human rights defender in our country. It's very costly to speak up. I spoke up and they called me mad. I spoke up and they took me to prison. I spoke up and they... You know what happened? I'm now in exile. Okay? I spoke up and women who should have been speaking up were saying, Stella Nyanzi yagweddalo, Stella Nyanzi zolo, Tugamba. Those women who are silent today, the women who say, we'll sit right where I'm in exile, self-imposed exile. Today they're telling me, Stella, some of them are saying, Stella, so some women have been reduced because of fear of what happened to those of us who spoke out. When people see what I went through in prison, when people hear the plight other women who spoke out have gone through, they look at Betty Namboza's back. They look at, you can talk about a million different women who have spoken out. There's Comrade Olivia Lutaya who went to jail simply because she was standing together with Bobby Wine or NUP. The women who have had to suffer because they're speaking out. Part of what the dictatorship does is to use them as an example in order to act as deterrents to other women.
So that they are
There's fear. There's fear. People say, I'm a mother. I have 3 children. Stella Nyanzi left her children at home. So there's silencing, but there's also loss of jobs. Those of us who work in Uganda are either public servants, or we're in the private sector, or we're in the market economy. Now what happens to a person like me who was employed by the government at the oldest university is public service was used to deny me my job. I was taken to court, and then I took Makerere to court as well. It didn't matter that I won in court. It did not matter. I still cannot go back to Makerere as long as the system does not change. Women who are in the business sector, malls, those women rely on paying taxes to Uganda Revenue Authority. The minute you are named and marked as Daisy is that woman with a Waizeka head, okay? They will tax you, they will come after your business. I have friends. You'll be blacklisted. You won't just be blacklisted. The taxes will go higher. Your goods will be impounded. Business partners will start withdrawing. Who wants to do business with an anti-government person? Civil society organizations such as feminist, civil society organizations, non-government organizations were shut down. Okay? Women's organizing has been paralyzed because the government is actively aware and engaged in subduing the power of women. So on Mother's Day, I think for me, one of the things I'd like to do with our conversation is to call out motherhood and call out women and call out daughters and call out sisters and call out wives. Abantu mama Janeti, omuzimu oguba kutegubate. Omuzimu ogukwate obuchala in Uganda, the demon that is holding back women's power. We call it pussy power. Our pussies are powerful. That power should come to the front line. We should refuse to fear, because many times, even in the Bible, when nations were afraid, it took an Esther, it took a Rachel, it took a Deborah, it took even Delilah who cut off Samson's hair, even Jezebel. We need wicked women and holy women and vulgar women and polite women to come back to the front line and do what we're supposed to do as women. We are healers, we are builders, we are lovers, we are nurturers, we can speak peace, we can also speak war. Me, I call warriors to the front line. And after we do that, we'll have healing. But women must play our part. Because when God created man, he said, it's not good that man should be alone. And God made us from the rib. Me, I'm not from a rib. Maybe I came from two ribs. But my point is, those who are religious and think we must be submissive as women, God has a role for us to play as well. Our cultures about Uganda. What ethnic tribe are you?
I am a Mugisu.
You're a Mugisu. I don't know about Gisu women, but Baganda women, my ancestors were strong women. I look back and I see a long line of strong women. I want my daughter and my granddaughters and the great-great-granddaughters to build this lineage.
Yeah, so Stella, we also ran a poll to receive some questions online, and this is like one of my very favorite parts. We have Nanchi from Facebook who asks, how have you managed to raise your children without their father? What advice would you give a single mother on how to raise them into happy and loving children?
I raised my children on love. I conceived my children in love. I was married to their father when I had all the three of them. I married in a Muslim, in a mosque in Gambia, a small village called Esau. And one of the things that matter for me is, as a mother, in spite of whether I was rich or poor, that love prevailed. If I love my children, there are things I will not allow to happen. There are women who have said to me, how can you do that? A whole mother? How can she say those words? A whole mother? But I say those words, I fight every day because I have a daughter. I want Uganda to be better for my daughter. I love my daughter so much, I don't want to leave her a polluted Uganda where she'll say, but mom, what did you do? When Museveni did this, what did you do? When Muhoozi was doing this, mommy, what did you do? Mama Stella, what did your generation do? Okay? And because I love my children, there are things I will not allow to happen. My daughter went to a private school in Uganda, and there was abuse happening by the system. Black girls had to cut off their hair. Indian and white girls were allowed to grow their hair.
Structural racism.
And for me in P1, immediately was like, how? So I came in into the school with Baraka. I cut off her hair, and then she cries because culturally for her, my children's father is Gambian. Culturally for them as Fulani people, you must have your hair. We nurture beauty as we nurture brains and we nurture muscles among the Fulani women. And so when they say it's Indian culture, I say, but my daughter is an African. And in her culture, we don't shave the heads of young girls. And I fought. The women, the mothers in that school, were the first to say, how can she fight? If she wants, she can take her child out. And I say, no, I have the money. I have the money for this private school. I'm not begging any of you. I'm not a debtor. And my children have the grades to stay in this school. My daughter swims. So out of love, I changed that policy. PTA meetings, I became the chair of PTA. I sat in those meetings. I raised my hand. I spoke to Sudhir. I spoke to Rajiv. May Rajiv's soul rest in peace. I spoke at Kampala parents until P3. Black children were allowed to grow hair. It seems like a very small thing, but in terms of dignity and pride of our children, how do you tell your black child, Baraka, you're black, you are equal to Surita, who is an Indian, and you're equal to Bella, who is Italian. They have hair, but you're told your hair is dirty. It is these acts of love where we fight from a place of love that make me the mother. People are like, how could you say those words? How can you not insult Museveni? If you love your daughter. Museveni akola ki ekyobusiru n'osirika. How can I keep quiet when Makerere is threatening to take away my children's food? I talked and I begged and I talked and I begged and I wrote letters. I was polite. I did everything that civilized society does. My children's food was going away. So I undressed. I brought my breasts to the front line. Every woman in Uganda should be able to do this in order to change their environment. So people who say, how could she do this when her daughter was there? I told Baraka, come. Waswa, Kato, you come from your room, come from your decas, you come down. Tomorrow, this body that you see is going to be on all the television stations. You know why? Because my job, which takes you to school and feeds you and pays for the car fuel and takes you to hospital. My son Waso had just been operated in a private hospital.
Yeah.
I'm a single mom. I get my money through hard work. Makerere is paying me a salary. I work so hard. And a man is threatening me, and all of Makerere says, yes, this man is abusing your contract. But he's an elderly professor who has done so much for Uganda and knowledge building. Nyazi, you're in the right, but he's a male professor. He's old. You wait. Keep quiet. Be humble.
Yeah.
And they're taking away my job. And the expectation was I would sit down and be a good girl. No! I brought these 2 bazookas to the front line. Didn't you see them, Daisy?
I saw them.
Hey, never bazooka.
Stella, I have been traumatized for 9 years after seeing your bazookas. But anyway.
But why is it trauma? You have a problem. No, don't laugh. Don't laugh. I'm not laughing with you. I was fighting a war. Why were you traumatized?
No, I understand it now.
Why were you traumatized?
I understand it now.
I was fighting for you.
Yes, you were fighting for me.
Like
but
I was
at
fighting
that
for Baraka.
There was also a lot of different other propaganda.
Do not be a person who falls for propaganda. I cannot deal with women who don't think for yourselves. Sit down and say, Nyanzi yambudde bagamba mulalo. Bawa omulalu omulimu emakerere. Sit down and think for yourselves. You Ugandans who are watching me on Facebook Live. Mutuule wansi emmana muzituuze wansi mulowooze Nyanzi agenda okweyambula nga Makerere yamuwa omulimu nagenda okweyambula nga ndi muguwa ddalu.
So Stella,
why were you traumatized?
No, I like that.
Why were you traumatized?
No, because I mean
because you have been raised in the patriarchy.
Yes,
your
exactly.
breasts are beautiful. Men love these things. Women too. Our babies suckle these things. These are weapons, just as they're sites of pleasure.
Yeah.
So
Stella, I would like
you. Me, I don't work with weak women, Daisy. I don't work with weak women. I don't understand why your own body would traumatize you. When men stand around, on Derek, what generated belly. Mugamba bana go ina muscle, bana 6-pack. Agande bwengalete lwaki ofuna trauma nga nawoga ino ina kalega kalinga akange. That is the power they took away from us. Our bodies are sacred. Do not be traumatized because you're believing the narrative of men.
I like
Mother's Day, our breasts give us the name Mama, mammary glands.
I like that you have opened up this whole conversation about our bodies and sexuality and everything. Now, Stella, this was one of my favorite questions from online. It said, you have fought for Uganda, you have gone to prison, and you are also willing to die for everything that you believe in. And do you see yourself as Uganda's first female president at some point in the future?
I think that a person who says, I fought for Uganda imagines that I'm not part of Uganda. I was fighting for myself. I say to you, when I was fighting Museveni, it was for my children. Okay? I cannot bear the thought that my children are going to live under that oppression in Uganda. I cannot bear the thought that my children have to live under a dictatorship. So as a mother, I refuse to stay silent. I refuse to stay passive. As mothers, we have to do something. So when I was fighting, I wasn't fighting for Uganda. I was fighting first for myself. Feminism says the personal is political, the political is personal. So for me, before I was fighting for those mothers out there, I was fighting for Stella Nyanzi and her children and her community. It is my struggle too. Will I become first woman president? I am not running for president today. I am seeing the elections that are coming up in 2026. I see the election violence. I see an inept electoral commission appointed. Commissioners appointed by the dictatorship. I see the money that is being spread in all the political parties, the division of our opposition political parties. I see the masses disillusioned and trying to find ways to liberate themselves. I see a failing economy. People are so poor that their vote will be paid with salt and t-shirts that say Museveni tova kumeini. This year, 2025, I'm observing the 2026 elections. I observe them with the memory of the murders that happened in 2021 when young people, old people, businessmen, a woman who was hawking food, nobodies, but also somebodies were shot. Shot on our streets because of elections. 2026, I'm an exile. I'm observing. If the men don't get their acts right, Ugandan women must arise. On Mother's Day 2025, as we go to 2026 and have an election, perhaps we should observe and see Museveni, Muhozi, his son, Bobby Wine, Kiza Besigye, my president, is in prison. Bugisha Muntu I love, but he doesn't seem, he's like a barking dog that doesn't bite. Mao has been corrupted. All the men who are leading all these political parties, the ones who are running for the presidency, my own party president, Patrick Oboya Muriat, the sort of political gimmicks they're playing are sacrificing our country. So if the men fail in 2025, in 2026, they mobilize another fake election. It is your future. My children's future. I'm in the evening of my years. I'm going. But perhaps the women should arise. It is not to say that women are not fallible, because the First Lady, the Prime Minister, the Speaker of Parliament, the women members of Parliament, the women cabinet ministers, they haven't served Uganda. They haven't served Ugandan women. They haven't served Ugandan men and children. They haven't served our country. They have served their bellies. But perhaps there'll be a new crop of women. And if you offer solidarity, and we're looking for a leader, and we fail, Baraka fails to become the next woman president, Dora doesn't run for president, Amita doesn't run, Kabatata doesn't run, perhaps I will run for the presidency. But what I'm saying is today I'm in exile.
I like that.
Today I'm in exile. And we should as women observe what is happening in 2026.
Stella,
how many women presidential candidates will there be? How many will there be? Answer me, don't look down, answer me.
I mean, for the very last election, I think there was only one.
Why did she not perform well?
Yeah.
Why didn't women support her? I ran for the parliamentary elections in 2021 and I learned some lessons. We need finances to mobilize. We need solidarity. We need partnerships. We need access. We need to do the things that politics demands of us to get mass mobilization. Is there time for 2026? I don't think so.
The 2026 election seems closed already. But now we come
But is it an election or is it a posturing of elections?
It is a mock election. We come to another question from Ario Andrew. He asks, Dear Stella, in history we have seen a trend of governments falling and a big role was always done by people living in exile. I would like to know your view on two questions. Number one, will Uganda be liberated by people inside the country, where it has become evident that free speech is prohibited, more so when any voice that comes out must be imprisoned, kidnapped or silenced for good? Number two, what do you think people in exile should do? I think by exile he's also talking about the diaspora, Ugandans, the diaspora. What do you think people in exile should do to the liberation struggle? And maybe lastly, you personally, what are you doing now that you're in exile? And people say that you abandoned the struggle. So these are Andrew's two questions.
Right, I mean, so look, as a Ugandan, I totally believe that the struggle will be fought by people in Uganda. Okay? We cannot prioritize exile, we cannot prioritize diaspora, we cannot prioritize foreign relations, we cannot prioritize even our allies outside Uganda before we prioritize Uganda. Okay? The Ugandans in Uganda at home, the Ugandans outside who can go back home, those must mobilize and they should be at the forefront of the struggle. There is a lot of organizing that can be done in country and must be done in country. The sort of intelligence we need, the analysis we need must be done in country, because the enemy we have has got his roots in the country as well as outside the country. Now, because of repression, oppression, suppression of the dictatorship, because of increasing military rule, because of increasing authoritarianism and totalitarianism, we need to be able to form cells outside Uganda that are organizing. In East Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, maybe Rwanda, maybe Congo, who knows, the DRC, maybe South Sudan. But Kenya and Tanzania have histories of working with Ugandan opposition forces, anti-government forces, to mobilize resources, mobilize safe spaces, mobilize training, mobilize landing from wherever people come to lay low. And I know that the 1986 Bushmen had a lot of cells within Kenya because my father was contributing towards the struggle from Nairobi. We were refugees in Nairobi as children. And the importance of the region East Africa cannot be overemphasized. One of the things is that Museveni is revered by all the dictatorial presidents, whether it's Tanzania or Rwanda or Kenya or South Sudan or even Burundi or the DRC. He's been meddling in all those economies. But the resistance also has cells in these countries, which we must strengthen. Now, those of us in Europe, those of us outside East Africa, those of us in Asia, in North America, we too have a role to play in terms of mobilizing support, mobilizing ideas, re-energizing the struggle, re-energizing the people at home, training, getting ideas, refreshing, supporting. Our role is a supportive role, much more than playing center stage. In terms of organizing, I know, for example, that during the fight against apartheid in South Africa, there were cells that went to Mozambique, that went to Namibia, that went as far as Kenya, Zambia, Uganda as well. There were all these cells of exiled South Africans who were organizing. And if you remember, there were musicians and creatives and writers who were exiled from South Africa who formed a world tour organizing the Makebas. Yes, but in the world of literature, because I'm a poet, I'm talking about poetry today, there were many poets who wrote about apartheid and organized worldwide communities of solidarity with South Africa. And I think the bans, if you remember the bans against South Africa was banned from football, was banned from international sports, was banned from economic trade. South Africans many times could not travel outside to other countries just like that. And I think for me that the sanctions, the trade sanctions against South Africa are part of the sort of foreign-based lobbying we can do as Ugandans in exile. So people who laugh at me and say, yes, Stella Nyanzi situlago ya mulema kubanga yafuluma Uganda mwaswaye badacho yumo nze najja kubanga omujasi afudde tasobola kurwana. A dead soldier cannot fight. The other thing is, in Uganda, those of us who are at the front line, we don't get time to heal. I was imprisoned so many times. I was poisoned. My body was poisoned. My children didn't have an income to allow them to continue their lives. So for me, I had to get out.
Stella, what message would you give to the Ugandans?
Exile for me was about healing. Before I go to those Ugandans in diaspora, I want to say, when a soldier refuses to die, when a soldier refuses to be imprisoned another time, and that soldier nakwata bunduki nafuluma muleka afulume kubanga yetaaga okuwona tewali yali agenda kuzijanjaba. I was poisoned. Who in Uganda was going to give me treatment? Which hospital in Uganda was going to treat a woman who says bampa obutwa ngandi muki mukomera? So I kept quiet, and I got a strategy to get out. In Germany, they badden net janjaba abagamba perfect them. No, abagamba self-exile. So nafuluma mpune mfuna ddagala nyige ebibundu nezzo obujja neze ndi ku front line.
Stella, do you see yourself going back to Uganda?
Totally.
Anytime soon?
Totally. My heart beats in Uganda. But my heart cannot beat when it's poisoned. The struggle, Dr. Chiza Besigye has taught us that the struggle for liberating Uganda is not a sprint. It is a marathon. It is a marathon. Abadduka marathon. Tumayiti struggle. See, tegera kugwancha. Bwene gwencha mukama yeebazibwe. Naye soldier bw'aba afudde tagenda kulwana. Soldier bamukubye ekyasi kya butwa. Soldier bamukubye ekyasi agudde eddalo. Soldier bamukubye ekyasi okugulu kukoza ki kumenyese. afune obujjanjabi kubanga mwe temujja mujjanjaba. There was nobody in Uganda who could pay my children's education. My children go to the best schools wherever we are. In Uganda, they went to the best schools. There was nobody who was going to pay their rent. There was nobody who was going to treat my body. There was nobody who was going to employ me. And I decided to step out of Uganda so that I could heal, so that I can go back. Imagine being in Uganda like Chanja or Chanju. Imagine being in Uganda like Sajirinya. Imagine staying in Uganda and dying because our health systems don't work anymore.
Stella,
especially for poor people.
Stella, what message?
So I am going to go back to Uganda. I'm answering your part B before I get to your part C. Don't trash me. Part B. Am I going to go back to Uganda? Yes. But now Uganda nkomawo. Achaza when nkomawo. Tuya kayemba kaffe tugamba ffe wetuli. Tetugenda tukubira ku front line. That boy is my cousin. Me, I don't need copyright from Peter Miles. Why that song is important is Nemo Exile. Zendi ku front line. Nekakati eno space mwabanda bandi ku front line. Nabandale ku kitanda ngamba Museveni wampo obutwa. Gandi ku front line. Nebamba musekerera. Mbera ku front line. One day I'm going home because my future is not here. My children need to get the German education. The universities have been captured by the state. My children go to school uninterrupted. Unless you're envious and jealous, let my children go to school.
Stella, I would like you to tell a Ugandan
in diaspora.
Any Ugandan in the diaspora or in Uganda who thinks who thinks whatever is happening.
Your part C was about diaspora.
Yes.
So I want to speak to Ugandans in diaspora. Stella Nyanzi is busy doing what she does. I have a PhD. Me, I'm not bachelor's. Abasoma bachelor's mwebala okusoma mufuneka degree akasoka. I'm not masters. The masters najisoma nefuna neyo kubiri bungereza. I am not PhD. PhD na dimala. Okay? Nekurana postdoc. My duty as a Ugandan does not need me to be in the country. I'm a thought leader. Okay? I'm a thought leader. Thought is about thinking. I can sit anywhere and type on my laptop. This was in Facebook. Type, send a Facebook post. I do not have to be in the country to do my work. Me, I'm on the front line. Whether I'm in the sea, or I'm in the sun, or I'm on the moon, or I'm in Uganda, or I'm in Kenya, or Germany, or Austria, or wherever. My job is to remember. Emundu yange singo bunene. Era nasoma. Erox okuwerera kw'abazadde bange. My network has gone. Okuwerera kw'abazadde bange. Tekusobola kuŋŋaana kukola ki? Sola baswaza. Wemba nasoma. Bande kensigale ku front line.
I like that you mentioned that you could sit and write
a diaspora sinakituuka. Gw'okutula.
Yeah.
You were saying something?
No. I would like you to send a message out to Ugandans in the diaspora and in Uganda who think this is not their struggle.
So, you read that poem that Nietzsche wrote. And I think for me, any Ugandan who thinks they are doing fine, who thinks that the struggle is for failures, who thinks that the struggle is for failed people, who thinks that the struggle soldier byabo abayala ffe tulina sente zaffe tulya byabo Stella Nyanzi ate bamanyi ki basigo maaza byabo ba Daisy Rachel kutuukako. Uganda is suffering a particular crisis. Ekiri atabala is a proverb in Uganda. Ekiri atabala kikira n'alyeka. Okay? Fish begins rotting from the head. Eventually it rots entirely. All these are little proverbs that show that one of us, we can't be free when one of us is not free. Yeah? If it affects Daisy today, tomorrow it will affect you. Those abductions used to happen to FDC people. And I remember very many young people saying, abutagana tebatugamba. Abduction kati ziri wammwe. Mweba Gen Z. Mwabagamba generational leader waffe Kyagulanyi. Kakati bakwata mmwe. Batusibanga. Nga twekalakasa ne batusiba Stella Nyanzi kyagwedda. Wabula ekikazi ekyo kyantama. Those women, who do they think they are? Kakati basiba mmwe. Okay? You thought it was mad women running around with Chiza Besigye who are being arrested. Today it is you at the front line, because what was my issue? They people exile. Oba mwekalakasa, oba temwekalakasa, ze Germany basi zikola, eddwaliro likola, amasanyalaze gaaka, sirina kinnume Germany. Ensonga zammwe tezikyaliza, ezimwaga nga nsonga za Stella Nyanzi, zimutenda biberekera. Naye nawe kikutuuseeko. Because when the government is taxing, they don't say we shall tax NUP and not tax NRM. They tax all of us. Okay, so my space closed. I'm not going to go back to it. They tax all of us. When the government of Uganda is doing a national curriculum for education, the one that Mama Janet, the one who is not my mother, the one that Mama Janet heads, when they're taxing education, or when they're doing a curriculum for children, it is for all Ugandan children. Whether your kids you're in NRM and your kids go to a school in Uganda that is going to sit for O-level and A-level and PLE, which of course the education system. If the education was meant to make our children dense and take away critical thinking, all the children who go to that system, unless you can afford private education. Okay? Security. Issues around security used to be securities of those opposition members. When did the soldiers begin killing ministers? Wasn't it a long time ago?
Long time.
Is it happening again and again and again? Let's talk about road networks. The road, we used to complain about roads as women because the roads in Kampala city were so bad. Pregnant women would almost have issues just traveling on the roads to go to deliver. They deliver prematurely because of the roads. And people thought, it's those poor women. Last week, a rich man and his son. One died, the other one is grieving. Very close to Dictator Museveni. The wealthiest man in Uganda is grieving today because his son Rajiv was murdered by a terrible road network. Why? Because he thought, those issues of bad roads are for those opposition members. He thought being close to the Musevenis would spare him. Tomorrow, Mother's Day, Rajiv's mother is going to be crying. Just as Eddie Mutwe's mother will be crying. Just as Yasin Mashete's mother will be crying. Just as Kiza Besigye's mother, I'm very close to Kiza Besigye because he's my son. He's my son. Because it's now an issue for all Ugandans who dare to speak. Okay?
Stella?
So,
Yeah.
Temusala nti tebinkwatako fenna bitukwatako naffe abali mu exile. Now that money is rare in Uganda, obwavu bungi. Oba tebasobola kusomesa mwana Hi Daisy, gundi teyasomye bamugobye school fees. Hi Drake, munaye anko yafudde tuweerezeyo ku mabugo, munaye tuweereze ez'obuugi abantu bagenda kusula njala. Hi Baraka. You know that my daughter who was your classmate is very sick. She's going for an operation. You know that when she was being operated, the doctor did a day and then there was no electricity and now we have a critical case. Berika, please tell your mother to send us some money. So even those of us who are in exile, the little money we are making, if any Ugandan has connections to what's happening at home, you know the poverty.
It's not even possible to make money in the diaspora and invest back home.
Or enjoy it. Because we are always spending. We're always spending. We're always spending. So if you don't realize that the crisis in Uganda is your crisis too, you're blind.
Yeah, Stella, I would like you to look in the camera and send out a message to people like the Fast Son and people who violate rights of people and untouchable or think that they're above the law.
I don't know what age our live stream is, but I have a message from Muhoozi, and I've been saying it over and over again. Muhoozi Kainerugaba arrested Eddie, well, he didn't arrest him, he abducted Eddie Mutwe, and he said he was in his basement learning Runyakore. Now, I'm a Uganda person whose father was the head of the National Referral Hospital in Barara in Kacheka for a long time. As a child, I learned Chitara, although I'm a Uganda. I have a message for Muhozi Kaineru Gaba. Kachuge nyoko. Kachuge nina Muhozi. Okay? And that is some of the Runyankore that I studied. It means fuck your mother. And I'm very serious because if his mother was unable to train him, we blame the mother. The Bible says a good son brings honor to his father, but a bad son brings shame to the mother. Who else did you want me to give a message to?
So what about the mother? I mean, as
have
a mother
I scared you?
Of course.
No, I do not talk to Janet Museveni. I don't have time for her. Janet Museveni should resign. She should resign from Ministry of Education. She has spoiled her education system. Janet Museveni should step down. Janet Museveni should tell Yoweri Museveni to step down. Janet Museveni twabako agwene chiba cho Museveni matako butako.
What message would you like to send out to the international community? Because now you can address the international community since you're in the diaspora, and this is some of the lobbying that Ugandans in the diaspora need to be lobbying for now, and letting the people know what is actually happening in Uganda.
Well, Ugandans in the diaspora, we need your support and solidarity. We need you to remember that home is home. There's a cliche that goes east or west, home is best. And there are those of us who live in diaspora and say, wherever I lay my head, that's my home. It doesn't matter what your ideas of home are, but I want to call us back home. Remember the country that gave birth to you. Remember the country that gave you nationality. Remember the country of your descendants. You may not be a Ugandan citizen, Ugandan national today. You may not even have Ugandan residency today, but remember the land of your ancestors. And we need to be able, as Ugandans in diaspora, to think about Uganda, front the issues of Uganda, and contribute in different ways to the struggle. You may not be able to participate in politics, but you may be able to support financially. You may be able to amplify the issues and the crises that are in Uganda. But I think more and more, if you're a Ugandan living in diaspora, that you're going to be needed to support, in terms of rapid response, Ugandans back home who are participating in different ways in the liberation struggle. To comrades who are not Ugandan but are friends of Uganda and are interested in what's happening in Uganda, Uganda needs your eye and your ears and your mouth. We need you to be able to study the situation in Uganda, inform yourself about what's happening in Uganda by following good spaces, listening to podcasts and reading newspapers that are current about what's happening in the country. Do not believe the foreign relations and the propaganda that posture and continue to posture Yoweri Museveni as a democratic head of state. He is a dictator who is lining up his son, who is abducting and torturing Ugandans, abusing the military budget, abusing our defense system to entrench his father and his family role in power. Ugandans need the support of foreign allies abroad, particularly when it comes to the organizing towards the 2026 elections, because we know we come from a history of violence, particularly election-related violence before the elections, during the elections, and after the elections. We need observers of our election system to be more honest and transparent when they come to observe the elections and not do what they did previously and declare we had free and fair elections, yet in fact Ugandans were cheated out of our suffrage right to vote.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think you had her, Stella Nyanzi, live in person. And we leave you with the words of Nelson Mandela. Do not look the other way, do not hesitate. Recognize that the world is hungry for action, not words. Act with courage and vision. Until next time, we thank you so much for joining us.
Amen.